Hello everyone, I am Utsav and in this video we would understand the basic about joins. What are joins, the type of join. So before starting just see this data. So imagine you have a table like this in your database. So if I ask you to find a very obvious problem with this data, you would tell me is that this information of department name and location is repetitive. So it's not unique. So in this case, imagine if you have 100 or 1000 more employees which are joining IT department, right? So let's say you have E5, E6 and all. So for all those employees, you have to put this information again. It's a repetitive work and it will waste your space and resources as well. So how can we overcome that? Before that, just think that if your manager asks you, okay, you have this table, and your manager asks you that, tell me what is the department name for Sam. It is very easy for you to find out from this data. You know that this is Sam, and for the Sam, the department name is admin. So you can give your answer as admin. Or if somebody asks you what is the department location for Jim, so you know for Jim, the department name is IT, and for this IT, the location is Seattle. You can give this answer very easily. But when you add more and more data to this particular table, then this information, which is repetitive, it will be duplicated and it will waste a lot of your resources and space. So, how can we overcome that? So, imagine that instead of this, you have added one column in between. So you had this data. Imagine you want to add one column in between, and that column can be a alphanumeric string. It can be a number like 10 or 20 as well. It's perfectly fine, whatever you want to keep it. Now I can use this data, this department ID, to differentiate between departments. But still, you see, this department ID is duplicated. So for admin, it is same, and for IT, it is different. So if we want to separate this data from this department data from employee, and if you remove it, then you have an employee table and you have a department table. But in department, you still need this department ID. So imagine you keep this, but now again the department is duplicated here. So let's remove the duplicate. Now you have two department. For those department ID, you have data present in employee table. Also imagine this way that tomorrow, let's say you are told that for IT department, the department phone number is changed. It is 03 now. So if you have a million rows for this IT department employees, then you have to update that phone number everywhere. It is very time consuming effort. And is it really needed? In this approach, if we have this department data separated from your employee data, you can update this department phone number at one place only. So this is a more meaningful way to store data, and this is called relational table. So that's the reason all our database, Oracle, SQL, most of these databases are called relational databases because there is a relationship between the tables. And tables are uniquely identified via a primary key. So in this case, it's employee ID. For department, it's department ID. So the final form of this table would look something like this. You have department ID in employee table, and that would link to department ID in department table. And you have department data separated. So I have created a separate table in database. I have used only department ID and department name here. And in this case, I use only employee ID, name and department ID. I've removed this joining date and the other column because it's not needed to understand the joins. So this is our database. So if you see, I have this M table, it's short for employee, and it has employee ID, name, and department IDs. Same way, I have a department table, I have department ID and department name. Now, in this case, if I ask you that can you tell me what is the department name for gym? Then how can you traverse that? So you don't have department name here, right? But you have department ID. So you can say, okay, for gym, the department ID is 20. Let's check in department table. Okay, I found the department ID 20. The department name is IT. So we know for gym, the department name is IT. Same way for SAM, the department name is admin. If I ask you to write a query for it, can you write in terms of a SQL query? Then we have to find a way to join these two data set. And we have seen that the common relationship between these two tables is the department ID. So let's write a select join clause. So we will do a select star. We will select all the columns for now, and we'll say emp e join dptd on e dot department id equals to d dot department id. So if I don't give this, if I just run select star from emp e join department, if you run this, you will get an error because you have to specify a join condition to your database. So now in this case, when you specified this join condition and you run this, you see this is the data you got. Now, if you correlate this data to what we have in the first place, so this is similar to that. So you have a repetition of data here because you have joined this data based on department ID. So you are again back to what you wanted here. So if I ask you to tell me the department name for Sam, you can easily tell by looking in this place. Similar way, here if I ask you if you want to give the department name for Sam, this is in one row only. So how the join works in backend is it will pick everything from the first table and then it will compare the second table based on the joining condition, right? So we have this data. Let's save this. We'll come back to it again. Let's run this again. So how your database will interpret this data? So if I say select star from emp join department on department ID, so it will pick everything here. So it will say, okay, let's pick this data. Okay. Now, what is the join condition? Department ID. So this department ID D10. Is there any matching row here in the second table? Yes, it is. So it will copy this data as well and it will use in our output. Let's say there was no data for department ID 10 here. Then whole row will not be printed. Nothing would have been printed, which you will see again in future. Similar way for the second row, you will copy everything and department ID 10. So what is the data for department ID 10? This is it. And this is your output. Same way, you have data for these two. This is 20. And for 20, you have this. Now, if you see this data, this is exactly same what we got in our output. Your employee ID, employee name, department ID coming from employee table. This is the department ID which is coming from department table, and this is the department name. Now, if I ask you to just print the employee name and the department names. So in select clause, you can say select e dot employee name, comma, department name from department table. So the alias is d dot department name. And if I run this, you get this relationship for John, department is admin, and so on. This is same as what we had in the first place before separating of this data. So basically, you have reconstructed your first view And based on that, you have filtered the data. You have only selected the column which you wanted. So this is this join, what we did just now, it's called a inner join. If you just say join, by default, it will be treated as inner join. And inner join will give you all the matching data between two tables. Now imagine if you had one more row in employee table, right? So let's go back again. So you have this employee table. Let's add one more row in this employee table. Okay, so let's add this one more row. Okay, so we added this new row. So now if you see, we have one more employee, E5. The department ID is 30. Now, what would happen if we run the same query again? Do we get all 4 rows or do we get 5 rows based on this data? Take a guess. So whoever guess that we will get only 4 row is correct, because for department ID 30, we don't have any matching entry in this table. So your database will try to put this record as well. But because it could not find anything matching on this department ID, it will not print this. So if I run this, you will get the same data again. So hope inner join is clear to you. I will repeat again. In inner join, you join the you join two tables based on a common key, and only when that key is present in both the tables, you will get the output. But in some cases, that's not what you want. You want the data to come in a different way. You want the data, all the data from one table to appear in the target. So how can we do that? So in this case, let's take the same example again. If I tell you that give me the employee name and the city, and if I run this, you will not get data for Rick. Why? Because that is not present. Okay. So then how can we get Rick's data? So if we change this inner join to left join. So what I'm
So
saying here is this
this is
employee
how
table
you
is at your
can
left and the department table is on your right.
query left
So
join.
I'm saying
Now,
employee
what is the
left
advantage
join
of this?
department. That means
What
give
did you
me
achieve with left
everything
join?
from
What you can't
employee,
do with inner join?
irrespective
If I ask
joining
you,
condition
okay,
matches or not.
tell me
And from
all
department
the
table, only give me data when there's a
departments
joining condition which is
which are
matching.
present in
So in this case, what
employee
will
table,
happen
but they are
to
not in
the
department
department
table.
name? So if I tell you, if I ask you
You
to
guessed
give
it
me the
right, it will
department
be null
IDs
because
which are
there's
present in
no
department table,
department
but they are
name
missing
from.
present for department ID 30. If I replace this with star, you will see all the column
Okay,
which is coming.
so
So you see these 4 rows are as it is, what they were earlier, and this is a new row from employee, but for department this data is null. Now what can we do with left join? Why is it needed? How is it different from inner join? What extra can we do with it? So imagine a scenario. If somebody give you a requirement that tell me all the department IDs which are present in employee table, but they are not present in department table, then how can we get that? So one way is to use this minus query and all. But in this big data set, if you want to find this particular answer, it's very easy to do with the help of left join. So I just need to say select e dot department ID from e left join department, where d dot department ID is null. So wherever there's not a matching condition, the department table's data will be null. So if I put a filter on that, if I say wherever the d dot department ID is null, print the e dot department ID. In this case, you would find the missing departments which are in there in department table. So in this case, you will get this department ID 30, D30 in your output. So I hope inner join and left join are clear. Right join is reverse of left join. If I put this, if I say, okay, department, and I move this here and I change it to right, it will give me the exact same output. So A left join B and B right join A is exactly same. There's no difference. So hope inner join, left join and right join are clear to you. If you have more question on this, if you want to understand in more details, do comment and let me know. I will create another video explaining this in very detail. Thanks for watching. Have a good day ahead.